to our InsurTech 100 series, and today we are joined by Dror Katzav, who is the CEO and founder of Atidot. Dror, I have never met you before. We have never spoken before. I'm thoroughly looking forward to this conversation as a result. Tell me, I know about the business on the basis that we've tracked you guys, and we're going to dive into that, but I don't know anything about you. Can we start with a little bit of your backstory, which I've got a feeling is going to be an interesting one, and how that ties up with what you're up to today?
Of course. First of all, thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for covering us and promoting us as one of the InsurTech 100. My name is Dror Katzav. I'm the CEO and one of the founders of Atidot. My personal background is Israeli intelligence. I started my career in a program in the Israeli army called Atidot, and in this program we do a bachelor degree in physics and math, and we do basic training with all the branches of the army, and then you go and serve as R&D officer, having both academic background and practical experience. And amazing. I was in the Israeli intelligence building data solutions for about 11 years, and left the army around 2016, and very quickly started focusing on kind of the next exciting thing after Israeli intelligence, which was insurance. We, from the get-go, were thinking about, life insurance and some opportunities around data for life insurance, and founded Atidot. I moved from Israel to the US in 2019, and relocated a family, and now we live in Palo Alto. Moved here with my wife and the girls, and that's my background.
Mate, there's so much to unpack in all of that. So first of all, and excuse my ignorance, naivety. So is that kind of route into military intelligence or military service? That's the standard part of the kind of maturing? You turn 18 or you finish school or education, and you step into that. Is that commonplace for Israel?
Yeah, so in Israel, everybody that turns 18 joins the army for a mandatory service that is somewhere between 2 and 3 years. Okay. When I was drafted, it was a 3-year mandatory service. And then in the army, there are different programs that might require additional period that you would be drafted to the army. And my program specifically is a 9-year program. I did about 11 years, so I even signed up for more than just the 9 years. And that's being a very kind of special and elite program, is an opportunity both to kind of be positioned in units or situations where you can contribute a little bit more or a little bit differently than maybe other people, with the other side, which is that you sign to be a career officer for a substantial period of time. So yes, I joined the army like every other 18-year-old, but I stayed significantly more than most people.
Sure. And did you sorry, I mean, it's going really backwards in time, but did you have did you fall into the intelligence side, or was that an area that particularly interested you? Was it, I go back to kind of what I read at university is irrelevant for the rest of my life, and it was purely based on the interest I had in that almost kind of seasonal chapter of my life. But for you, was that kind of a known step, or was that I don't know, something that just kind of opened naturally to you?
So the program I joined, Talpiot, is an elite program. They recruit about 50 cadets a year, and out of those 50 cadets, about 30 finish the program. And okay, the 30 that finish the program have the opportunity to pick which unit they want to go to after the program, because there are not a lot of us, and all of us go through the basic training of all the different units, so you can basically join whatever unit you want. So obviously it's not as simple, and there is some considerations, but the unit I went to was a unit I kind of specifically picked because of the type of projects I would get involved with and the type of opportunities it would open up for me. And essentially the service I ended up doing was very exciting because you get exposure to a lot of interesting stuff. And more than that, you find yourself in a situation where, and my unit specifically was a unit where we had an interesting process where you would go to the administration and pick their brain on things they need to know about the world. And they would come up with somewhere between 5 and 10 questions. And our responsibility, once there were those questions, such as, what's going to happen in Syria, what's going to happen in Iran, what's going to happen, and so on. Our unit's responsibility was to come up with an answer for that. And to come up with an answer means technology and operation and intelligence and a lot of other stuff. And being on one hand very closely aligned to the needs of the country, and on the other hand very close to the technology as well was very exciting. And it was a great service and a great opportunity.
Wonderful. And I absolutely relate to that. And I'm not trying to draw any parallel with our world at Sonar, but for me as a strategist behind setting up my business, I was constantly getting asked, like, I don't know, it's all the time, but who's the next Uber, who's the next Airbnb, who's the next, and all I had is opinion, right? And it's what you're talking about, intelligence. So it's how do you use data and how do you use technology to empower and inform and beyond an opinion, and actually have a lens that gives you an answer to that, whether it is the right answer or not. It at least gets you closer beyond an opinion. Super interesting. Then the next thing that you mentioned is looking at data, looking at life, and setting up Atidot, right? Which there's got to be more to that story as well. So you say you're one of the founders. So you meet another person, another few people, and you start exploring conversations, start exploring the idea of setting up your own business. How did that come about?
So when we started, we were a group of 3 or 4 people that were sitting together and trying to brainstorm ideas. My co-founder, Barak Berkovich, was one of the technologists in my unit, and we've met 2 of the top insurance talent in Israel. One person, and both of them are still close advisors to the company. Oded Sarig, who was the commissioner in Israel, and Asaf Mizan, who was the chief actuary for the commissioner, both ended up doing a bunch of other stuff in the industry. And we were brainstorming ideas, especially in the insurtech space, because it wasn't called insurtech at the time, but in the insurtech space, because insurance, and specifically life insurance, is an industry where you have a lot of data, and there's almost nothing beyond data. Like when you try to understand and hedge, this risk, you're dealing with people, and almost everything impacts their livelihood, from medical to finance to basically everything. And then all you have is the data. And then the ways insurance companies were using the data, and in many cases still use the data, was very different than what we knew from other industries. Mm-hmm. So, coming from top tier intelligence units and having friends in the cyber and marketing and, and other technology spaces, we know how data could be handled, and we saw how insurance companies are using this data, and there was a huge gap in that. And we decided to dive into this space because that's something that directly impacts people. Because if you are able to crack that, then first of all, you drive huge, profitability and premium opportunity to a massive industry, and you create a big impact on a big industry. And on the other hand, you create a big impact on the people that currently have a lot of, insurance gaps and bad service in the way their policies are being managed. So, if you think about it from a policyholder perspective, life insurance is probably the last frontier when there is almost nothing you can buy online. There is some term that you can buy online, but beyond that, there's nothing you can buy online. You usually buy it from an agent. That agent leaves the business after 3 or 4 years. And then you are in a situation where you bought something you don't understand from somebody who is not in the industry, from a company that doesn't necessarily know how to service you. And that's supposed to still be there to build for your retirement when you're retiring in 40 years, or if you unexpectedly die in 10 years. Sure. And there is a huge gap there between what you need and what could be provided. And while the data is there and the technology exists, it's just figuring out what is the way to embed it into the process. And we felt that making sense of a lot of data and putting it in the right business context, in the right hands of the right people, is something we do have some experience with, in a different industry, but we have some experience with, and we decided to focus on life insurance and build Atidot around that issue.
And then what is the product or service that you guys are providing specifically? So let's maybe put it in the use case of, I'm a life insurer, an incumbent. I've been around 100+ years. I barely innovated. All those things that you said are true. I engage with you guys. Where do you start? Where do you stop in that engagement? What is it that I get from that?
So there is value across the process, but the starting point is definitely in force. The starting point is that you've sold policies for the past 100 years. Let's take 2 of the most prominent examples we have: Pacific Life and Guardian Life. One from the West Coast, from the East Coast. Both of them have been around for years, but both of them have many policies. And it starts from, let's look at this data and let's see what this data can tell us more than what you have. And what we found out that this data enable us to predict the policyholder behavior dramatically better than anything those companies had prior to working with us. And then the next challenge, and one of the things we started doing in the last year, was that up until COVID, what we did was to come up with those insights, push those to the executives as a form of reports and dashboards and whatnot. But then you deal with the next level of issues, which is, I can tell you that Matt, you have a policy and this, and you're in a high likelihood to make this or that action, you in a high likelihood to lapse or take some money out or drop some money in, or might be in a financial situation or a life event. The insurance company doesn't know what to do with that. For them to take that insight and then go and say, I want to talk to Matt. How do I talk to Matt? Nobody here knows how to communicate with the customer.
Yep.
So one of the things we started doing in the last year, and that's a partnership we announced with Guardian beginning of this year, was to work together on how to get access to the customer. So as I mentioned, in most cases, you bought the policy from an agent that is gone. And I need to find ways to re-engage with you and speak to you in your language, which is English and not kind of actuarial legal language that insurance companies use, to explain the situation you might have and trigger the action that you probably should have taken. So in that example, say you are a Guardian Life policyholder and bought a policy from whomever, and that whomever is gone, and your policy is in a situation, say there is a product opportunity, you can increase your coverage without additional underwriting, or you have a life event that requires withdrawing some money out of the policy, or changing some other parameters because of some tax benefits, and so on and so forth. I use the data and the AI to identify this opportunity and then build the marketing journeys to educate you on this opportunity, engage with you, and then when you're ready, put you in front of the right, hopefully, system and automatic journey where you can do that. In most cases, it's still the right individual that would guide you through the process to make sure that you get better service, you get a higher value policy for your needs. And from the carrier perspective, you get much stronger loyalty and much better profitability out of the existing book. So, less cost, more profitability, same customer, same risk, and much more value for both parties.
Love that. I mean, it's doing what you're already doing, just better, right? It's and just a wholly smarter way.
Have been doing.
Indeed. And then so all the theory sounds great, and in practice, so it's been out in market, up to 12 months. You were saying earlier this year. How has that been? I don't know. Have the benefits been realized yet, or is that still in validation? From both the insurer perspective, but also the customer. How has that fared?
Yeah, so I think we both agree, both us and the carriers agree that we've stumbled upon something that is very, very interesting, that shows high promise to be very, very successful. Life insurance is not a type of industry that would announce a win or a fail in 9 months or 12 months.
No, indeed, sure.
but from our perspective, we do see a lot of very good signs that we see that we can 10 to 20x that we are now 10 to 20x better in identifying policyholders with issues. We see that we are much better engaging with them. The customer wants the message is being transmitted in the right language, in the right timing, and in a much more personalized ways, is much more engaging compared to a random communication in your mail that nobody opens and nobody reads. So we see better models, better engagement with the policyholders. And we're definitely looking for next year to continue this momentum and unlock more of that value over time.
Yeah, and it leads me nicely into maybe a bit of a close, but possibly a big question before we do it. So I feel like, and you've alluded to it yourself, the life insurance part of the world of insurance, so the life space was pretty late to the innovation party. It's like they didn't get the invite. They maybe lost the second one, and but they're now kicking into gear. Equally, you guys, and I think another time I want to explore the whole you moving over to the West Coast and understanding the whole kind of taking your family and the girls, as you put it, and relocating life. But you guys have had an amazing journey, right? I feel like in So News I write about you guys almost kind of every other week and what you guys are up to and how you're getting on. And you have a market that seems to be embracing technology more and more so, and broadly at insurtech and sort of insurance innovation level, but certainly within the life space. Then you've got a business that's doing some amazing things. You mentioned two great clients, partners already. You're in the Sonar 100, and the amount of due diligence that goes on behind the scenes to bring that 100 together, who are such an incredible group of companies. So your performance, your metrics, your team, your product, it must be smashing it. It must be doing really well, right? Bring those two together. What does the future look like? No, right. Yeah, that's enough, right? But what does the future look like for you guys, right? So where are you at in any metrics that you can share? I appreciate you might not be able to, but where are you at today? Where we've got a sense of continuing that activity you mentioned through into next year. But how are you received in the market when you're engaging with other life insurance carriers? How are you feeling about your own business sort of direction of travel? How do you see sort of the next 5-10 years?
So I think coming out of COVID this year was a very exciting year for us. This year, from a headcount perspective, from a revenue perspective, from a fundraising perspective, we doubled all our metrics, which was very exciting. We do look forward for next year to continue that momentum. We haven't announced it yet, but we closed some level of funding in the last couple of months because of that momentum and success. We're working on some other exciting announcements that will come up beginning of the year. We are hiring on all fronts, so there is a lot of momentum. I think from a market perspective, we've been around for a while. I think when we started, insurtech wasn't even a theme. So we were kind of the other kids in the fintech party. So so I think we moved past that point. Insurtech is definitely a thing, and within insurtech, life is picking more and more momentum. And you see that across the market with various carriers, and there's definitely and we definitely experienced that too as a company. And for us, this is the reason why we're here. If you're here to make an impact on the industry and how people perceive life insurance and so on and so forth, the fact that it's now, especially post-COVID, when now people more, even the individual has a little bit more realization of what's the benefit of life insurance, and we see life insurance sales changing, and we see the digitization trending across the different companies. There's definitely more to do, but we are definitely on a better track than where we were a few years ago as an industry.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Dror, that's it from me. We'll be putting this video out in early 2022, so Yeah, we're going to have the Christmas break and whatnot. So I'm hoping this might even time in with some of the announcements that that you're talking about, whether it's funding or other things it's using as on there. But for today, thank you so much for your time. Congratulations again for your inclusion in the InsurTech 100. You've got a great business. Congratulations to you and the team for building that so successfully. And I look forward to the next time we talk. And then I want to know about this relocation story as well. So we'll save that for next time, maybe over a beer.
Perfect. We would love to talk about that too. I think in a nutshell about the relocation story, I think the interesting piece about it, and you also have that as part of Sonar. And I think that's one of the values of the newsletter and the perspective you bring into this, is that I grew up in a different insurance market, the European market, that operates differently from the way it is perceived to the way it's being used to the way it's being, you're paying for life insurance and the way it's regulated. And I think that difference in perspective also helps us not to be kind of stagnant in the way we think about the processes, because we know they might look differently in different countries, and that's some of the benefit that we bring to the table.
But I think you can I know we're closing it down, but I think to broaden it out just for a second more, but I think that also comes from entrepreneurs who come from outside of the industry, because there's an awful lot of criticism from quite early stage in those InsurTech days, so let's cast our mind back 3 years ago, where there was a lot of founders that weren't understanding the industry, and there's a lot of coaching that the incumbents needed to give to these startups to help them scale. But there's a positive as well. There's a real positive message that you come from a different mental paradigm. You've seen, the application you were saying yourself around data and intelligence in other sectors that you were able to bring in to insurance because you had seen it elsewhere. So I think there's and I couldn't agree more around that global perspective, and that's why I'm fascinated, almost kind of verging on obsessed around what's going on in the Asian markets, the LATAM markets, the US market, of course, the European market, because that's where we're based. Before I go and describe everywhere else in the world, but it's truly on a global perspective, it's like bringing that intelligence, because you never know, right? So the markets change and adapt, and different applications from other places may well be appropriate to different markets as well. And I think it's really interesting perspective. So yeah, Dror, once again, thank you for your time. Great to meet you. I look forward to meeting you in person, and now we have a connection, and I look forward to many more conversations.
Thank you for the opportunity, and this chat was great, and I'm looking forward to do more of those with you, maybe some of them off the camera and over a beer, now that the world is starting to open up a bit.
Sounds good. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.